Right, so thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. We've now crossed over the road, and I'm now standing on the site of what used to be the Boar's Head Playhouse. Originally, there was a tavern called the Boar's Head here in the 1530s, which was a tavern where people used to come. There were many of them that used to line the streets. Over the road you have the Hoop and Grapes. That's a pub which, again, dates from very early Tudor times. Here you had the Boar's Head, and because they had a large courtyard, it was a suitable place to put on performances of plays. And that started in 1557. Now, you had the period known as the Renaissance, which had started in the 1400s, the 1500s. It arrived in Britain. People were interested in plays written by classical authors in Roman times, and some of them were staged, but they wouldn't be staged popularly. They would be staged in schools and possibly in the court. But what makes this place so special is that this is the first place where theatres were performed as public, popular entertainment. And this, of course, was before William Shakespeare and his colleagues. The first purpose-built theatre was built in 1576, but before that they had to use a tavern as a place where they could erect a stage and then charge people to come and see their shows. And after all my researches, I can't find one that is older than this place, so I'm going to stick my neck out and say this is the oldest place in London and the oldest place in this country rather, where they started staging plays for popular entertainment, not just the aristocracy and not just the intelligentsia. So here they have very usefully, they've put down the building central courtyard of the playhouse as it was in 1598. Obviously it was adapted several times. The place has now been taken over. The site has been taken over by a company called Streets of Growth, and they promote this place, and they do a lot of good work in the locality, and I think, frankly, they deserve a separate video, so I shan't stay around here too long. I'm going to move on and make my way into Whitechapel. We're now in Whitechapel High Street. Looking ahead of us is Mansell Street, and I turn round to the left. We're still on the northern side of the street, called Whitechapel High Street. And as I head along here, we have, over on the left-hand side, we have Goulston Street. And I pointed out to you, again, this features in the story about Catherine Eddowes. I keep going on about this lady, but she was actually murdered not far from here, so it's inevitable. Catherine Eddowes, and we have Goulston Street, and a piece of evidence, actually, that relates, very important piece of evidence relating to the Jack the Ripper murders, is a little bit further down, but I'll talk about that, more about that later on. We'll head forward, and as we head forward now, you can see, if I just turn the camera round, the Whitechapel building. It's enormous, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see for yourself. This is Whitechapel of the 21st century, with all these modern buildings going up. This is a place where they hire out rooms for business startups and workshops. And they've been open since, again, I think it's 2017. So the point I'm making to you is that Whitechapel, although it's very, very ancient, in many ways it's also very, very modern. Going along even further, Old Castle Street. Now there isn't, as far as I can see, anything to mark the fact that this is Old Castle Street. Oh, that's the fire engine. Cross over just to show you Old Castle Street. Old Castle Street was the scene of a murder that took place here in July of 1889. A lady called Alice Mackenzie. And whether or not she was a victim of Jack the Ripper is something which is still disputed. You can see possibly in the distance there is a sign from the London Metropolitan University in that overarching bridge. But we'll carry on. We'll carry on from here. I'm not going to go all the way down, I just have to come all the way back again. Leading off here, you can see commercial road. Commercial road extends for just over a mile down to West India Dock, and it was laid out around about the year 1805, maybe just a little bit earlier than that, to link the docks with London and make it convenient for them to bring all the merchandise up from the docks into London and through Aldgate into the city. And you only have to go down not quite half a mile over on the right-hand side, that's on the south side. You come to Henriquez Street, which used to be called Berners Street, and that was the scene of the murder of a lady called Liz Stride. And like Catherine Eddowes, that also took place on Sunday the 30th of September 1888, just about an hour, just slightly under an hour before. Here is Aldgate East Station. Again, this is another station that connects with the district line. And here we have, over ahead of us, this is Commercial Street. Commercial Street was laid out in 1845. I won't go all the way down it again, but if you were to come down here, all the way down, about half a mile or so on the right, you'd come to see the church. Oh, it's a huge church, you can't miss it. It's Christ Church, Spitalfields, designed by Nicholas Hawksmoor, who was a pupil of Sir Christopher Wren. And opposite the church, or diagonally opposite the church, you have Spitalfields Market, or at least there was a market there. They closed it down in the 1980s. It used to be famous for selling fruit and vegetables, and the reason why they laid the street out, of course, was so they can get all the fruit and vegetables from the docks conveniently up to the market. And in order to do that, they had a lot of slum clearance, which displaced a lot of poor people. Didn't really do them any good. They just had to crowd themselves into other slums. A little bit further down, not very far down, just can't really see it. Where that white wall is, you have the Church of St. Jude. And that was the rector of the Church of St. Jude, a man called Samuel Barnett, who set up the first university settlement in 1884. Now, the idea of a university settlement was to provide opportunities for graduates from Oxford University to come down to study social conditions in Whitechapel. It was also an opportunity for them to give free lectures on academic subjects to the local population. So it worked both ways, and that's really what Samuel Barnett is remembered for, the university settlement movement, which then started to extend across the country and indeed across what was then the British Empire in different countries. And I say the concept really was to bring high quality education to people who would otherwise have absolutely no access to it whatsoever. Anyway, that is Samuel Barnett. And he had a wife called Henrietta, who was also very active in social work in this district at the time. Right, well, we're just going again. We're still on the north side of the street, heading east. It's a Sunday afternoon in September 2024, if anybody really wants to know that sort of thing. And This is just raw footage. I'm not editing any of this. I've got all these sounds of sirens and the police, fire, ambulance, whatever. I just pause here to show you a restaurant called Jack the Chipper. And Jack the Chipper is obviously cashing in on the story of Jack the Ripper, who was very active in this area. And it's interesting to note they sell fish and chips, serve fish and chips. Now, fish and chips was a common meal that was created, they say, in the year 1860 by a man called Joseph Malin for the benefit primarily of the Jewish people, the Jewish population. It was a custom of the Jews to eat fried fish, but you also had a very extensive Irish population at the time, and their staple food is potatoes. So Joseph Malin very cleverly adapted the two. He fried the fish and he chopped the potatoes up into chips, and then served both of them in wrapped up newspaper as a first takeaway fast food. And that's the story of fish and chips. And this is the outcome. You've got this restaurant, you can see for yourself sort of prices. You've got to pay what? There's £18.90 for a place. They've got some high quality fish here, I might add. Skate, rod, halibut. Yes, you've got quite a variety of things. So let's just go forward. That's Jack the Chipper. And Jack the Chipper will just take us down here into the area we might call Whitechapel proper. Now, again, over on the left-hand side, you have the White Hart Tavern. And that tavern dates, one of London's oldest taverns, dates from the year 1721. And it has a ripper connection. It has a basement where a man called Severin Klosowski, who at that time I think was calling himself George Chapman, he's one of the suspects in the Jack the Ripper murders. And he had a barber shop down in what was now the cellar. Going round here, we have Gunthorpe Street, and Gunthorpe Street is the original street that was walked along by Martha Tavern to her death. Therefore, she again was one of the Ripper victims. And you can be forgiven for thinking that the street is paved with cobblestones. Strictly speaking, they're not cobblestones. The proper name for them is sets. A set is a piece of granite which has been cut into the shape of a brick. But these stones were definitely used or definitely walked over by Jack the Ripper all those years ago. Let's go back into the High Street. And as we do this, there's normally a Jack the Ripper tour advertisement down here. They've moved it for some reason. Perhaps we're not having one tonight. And we just walk a little way ahead. This is just to give you an impression of what Whitechapel is like during the day. Sorry that the sky is somewhat overcast. Here, now this is interesting, this is Angel Alley. And at the present moment you've got freedom, anarchist and second-hand books. So you've got an anarchist bookshop here on the left-hand side, which you can go and examine for yourself if you want to do that. It just shows you that the politics of Whitechapel has always been somewhat radical, and that is an example of it. Right, move on. Head further forward. I'm just going to make my way round over to the right to show you the Whitechapel Gallery, the Whitechapel Art Gallery. Now, the Whitechapel Art Gallery was opened in 1901, and its inspiration came from the Reverend Samuel Barnett. The idea was that he used to stage exhibitions of contemporary art at Toynbee Hall, which was the original university settlement. The idea, again, was to bring high culture to ordinary people. And it was that really triggered this idea of creating the Whitechapel Art Gallery, which has been here, let's say, since the early part of the 20th century. And as we go forward, you'll see in a moment, over on the left-hand side, we have one of these circular blue plaques dedicated to a man called Isaac Rosenberg, who was born in 1890, died in 1918. Poet and painter, lived in the East End and studied here. He was actually born in Bristol, but came down to London as a child. He had Jewish parents, I think they were from Latvia originally, and he studied at the Slade Academy for Fine Arts and became a professional artist. He also wrote poetry, and he enlisted in the First World War when it broke out in 1914. And sad to say, he died a few months before the war ended. So anyway, he's remembered here. That's over on the left-hand side. And we'll go forward from here and make our way up to Osborn Street. And Osborn Street is just down here on the left. Now, what I'll do is just go a little way down Osborn Street, just to give you an impression of what it looks like. Of course, much of it has changed since Jack the Ripper's days, but if I were to continue walking, it just veers off slightly to the left and make our way down Brick Lane, which is famous for all the curry houses. Just before you get there, leading off on the right-hand side, you have Old Montague Street, and leading off on the left-hand side, you have Wentworth Street. So you've got a crossroads here, and I believe this crossroads is the centre of Jack the Ripper's neighbourhood. I believe that he actually worked, or lived around here somewhere, I should say. Lived and worked, possibly. But I think it's futile to go around looking for Jack the Ripper in any other part of London, or indeed any other part of Britain or the world. This is his neighbourhood, and I'll explain why in my videos. Right, what I'm going to do at this present moment is just swing round, and I think it's probably better that I should cut off here